The echo of their laughter was sharper than the click of my sensible kitten heels on the polished marble floor. It followed me out of the building, across the immaculate plaza, and down the 6 granite steps that marked the boundary between Phoenix Financial and the real world. A world I was now, suddenly and catastrophically, a part of again. I clutched the banker's box to my chest. A pathetic cardboard repository of 12 years of my life, now reduced to a few potted succulents, a framed photo of my sister, Clara, and a worn copy of The Intelligent Investor. I hadn't cried yet. The sheer, blinding shock of it had locked everything down, my throat, my tear ducts, the frantic, buzzing thoughts in my brain. Fired. The word felt impossibly crude, ill-fitting for someone who had sacrificed every late night, every canceled vacation, every missed family dinner for this company. For them. My name is Alara Vance. For the last 12 years, I was a fixture, a tireless engine in the investment banking division of Phoenix Financial. I started as an analyst, pulling all-nighters fueled by bad coffee and sheer ambition. I climbed the ranks, step by grueling step, associate, vice president, senior VP. I had a corner office, not with a panoramic view of the city, but one that overlooked the green roof, a subtle, constant reminder of the company's commitment to sustainability, and a far more brutal reminder of my own proximity to power. I had a reputation for being ruthless but fair, meticulous but fast. I was, by all metrics, a success. Until this morning. It started with a summons from Mr. Thorne, the managing director. His secretary, a girl named Bethany who always smelled faintly of gardenias and fear, led me into his office. The air inside was still and heavy, scented with expensive leather and something metallic, the faint, acrid smell of a trap. Thorne sat behind his immense mahogany desk, his face a mask of practiced regret. Beside him, like a silent, predatory sentinel, sat Marcus Sterling, the new chief operating officer, a man whose meteoric rise in the company I had watched with a mixture of professional respect and deep, personal mistrust. Marcus was charming, slick, and possessed of a chillingly efficient way of making people disappear. "Alara," Thorne began, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Please sit. We need to talk about restructuring." Restructuring, the corporate euphemism for a bloodbath. I pulled out a chair, my spine ramrod straight. "I'm aware of the firm's plans, Mr. Thorne. My team has prepared several models detailing potential synergy savings post-merger, factoring in a reduction in redundant back-office functions." I spoke confidently, my voice betraying none of the cold dread coiling in my stomach. I was talking about their jobs, not mine. I had brought in more capital this quarter than the last 2 VPs combined. I was untouchable. Thorne didn't meet my eyes. He fiddled with a gold pen. "This goes deeper than back office, Alara. We're looking at a fundamental shift in our investment strategy, a pivot towards a younger, more agile leadership." That's when the trap sprung. Marcus leaned forward, a razor-thin smile playing on his lips. "Alara, your contributions have been invaluable, truly. But the truth is the new direction favors people with a broader, less specialized skill set, people who are more adaptable to emerging digital trends." He paused, letting the silence fill the room like poison gas. "Simply put, the role you've perfected is becoming obsolete. We've decided to streamline. Effective immediately, your position has been eliminated." The words hung in the air, ludicrous and unbelievable. Eliminated. Not performance-related. Not a budget cut. Obsolete. They were telling me that 12 years of dedication, 12 years of making them millions, was now less valuable than a faulty fax machine. "Obsolete," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. My mind was racing, already calculating the severance package, the vested stock options, the sheer, unimaginable cost of this mistake. "Marcus, with all due respect, I closed the Kessler deal last month. A $500 million acquisition that you personally praised me for. I trained half the VPs currently on the trading floor. Are you telling me that my expertise is less valuable than agility?" Marcus merely shrugged, a gesture of casual cruelty. "It's a different environment now, Alara. The board wants a change of pace. I'm afraid this is final. HR is waiting to walk you through the paperwork." As I stood up, my chair scraping against the marble, I finally understood. It wasn't about obsolescence or agility or a new strategy. It was about Marcus Sterling. He had been gunning for my position, or at least the power I commanded, ever since he arrived. He saw me as a threat, a woman who didn't flirt or play corporate golf, a woman whose only currency was results. And now he had won. He hadn't just fired me, he had orchestrated a coup. I didn't argue, I didn't beg. My professional training kicked in, the decades of stoicism and control. I simply inclined my head. Very well, Mr. Thorne, Marcus. I wish Phoenix Financial the best of luck in its pursuit of agility. The sarcasm in my voice was so subtle, I doubted either of them caught it. It was the only dignity I had left. The walk back to my office was a surreal procession. HR, represented by a young man named Gary, trailed me like a pallbearer. The minute I stepped onto the trading floor, the low hum of activity seemed to drop by several decibels. Everyone knew. In the corporate world, news of a firing travels faster than light. I didn't pack anything personal until Gary, looking profoundly uncomfortable, had locked down my computer access. He watched me, a silent, pathetic guard, as I gathered my meager belongings. That's when the laughter started. It wasn't a roar of malicious glee, but a series of suppressed snickers, nervous coughs, and whispered jokes that carried on the quiet air. They came from the cluster of analysts and junior associates near the coffee station. Young men and women I had mentored, pushed, and yes, sometimes berated for their own good. Trevor, a cocky 25-year-old I'd personally recommended for a promotion, was talking with Jenna, a giggling VP from the M&A division. I caught a snippet of Trevor's voice, unnecessarily loud. Told you she was too old school. Good riddance to the Ice Queen. Now maybe we can actually have Friday happy hours without a budget review. Jenna covered her mouth, her eyes wide with feigned shock, but the malicious curve of her lips was unmistakable. They laughed because I was driven. They laughed because I never joined their clique. They laughed because they were young, and I was, to them, a monument of the old guard they were so desperate to overthrow. They were laughing at my vulnerability, at the spectacle of the Ice Queen finally melting. That was the moment the paralysis broke. A sudden, white-hot flash of rage flooded my system, eclipsing the shock and the sorrow. It wasn't directed at Thorne or Marcus. They were just playing the corporate game. It was directed at Trevor and Jenna and all the others who saw my firing not as a tragedy, but as an opportunity for schadenfreude. They didn't see the woman who was now facing an uncertain future. They saw a hurdle removed. I didn't look at them. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction. I simply lifted the box higher, took a deep, shaky breath, and walked. Stepping out onto the plaza, the autumn sun felt too bright, the air too cold. The laughter faded, replaced by the roar of city traffic. I stood there for a long moment, my sensible heels glued to the granite. 12 years. Gone. My phone, safely in my pocket, vibrated. It was a text, not from a colleague, but from Clara. "Sister, are we still on for dinner tonight? Mom's asking about the new apartment deposit. Need the money transfer ASAP. Call me." The text was a simple, mundane reminder of my other, more important life. Clara, my younger sister by 7 years, was everything I wasn't: creative, effusive, an artist struggling to make a living and utterly dependent on me. My mother, bless her fragile heart, was living on a fixed income, her entire retirement savings wiped out by a bad market crash 10 years prior. I was the rock. I was the only reliable income stream. The weight of that responsibility settled on my shoulders, heavy and immense. I didn't just lose a job. I lost the foundation that kept my entire family afloat. The new apartment deposit for Clara, my mother's escalating medical bills, my own crippling mortgage, it all flashed through my mind, a terrifying scroll of financial obligations. I finally reached the street, flagged down a cab, and gave the driver my address. As the city blurred outside the window, I let the shock recede and the rage solidify into something harder, colder, and infinitely more useful: determination. They laughed when I was fired. They thought I was old school, obsolete, the Ice Queen who was finally out of the game. They thought this was the end of Alara Vance. They were wrong. This wasn't the end. This was the moment I stopped building their empire and started building my own. I had 12 years of high-level, specialized financial knowledge, a relentless work ethic, and a burning, incandescent need to provide for my family. Marcus Sterling and Phoenix Financial had just made the biggest mistake of their corporate careers. They had traded a steady engine for agility, and in doing so, they had just created their fiercest competitor. The first tear finally tracked a path down my cheek, but it wasn't a tear of sorrow. It was a tear of pure, unadulterated resolve. The game was over. The war had just begun, and I knew exactly who the first casualty was going to be. I pulled out my phone, ignoring Clara's text for a moment, and opened my laptop's email access. The first thing I did was send an email to a long-forgotten contact, a high-risk venture capitalist I had dealt with years ago, a man who loved a good gamble and hated Phoenix Financial almost as much as I did. Subject, a proposition. Body, I'm out. I know where the bodies are buried. I have a plan. Call me. Elara. Then, and only then, did I call Clara. I wouldn't tell her the truth yet. I'd give her the money, reassure my mother, and then I would disappear into the financial underground, emerging only when I had enough power to make Phoenix Financial regret the day they chose laughter over loyalty. The silence on the phone as I waited for Clara to pick up was the last quiet moment of my life. I was fired. I was ridiculed. I was broken. But I was also free. And freedom, I was quickly realizing, was the most dangerous weapon of all. The cab dropped me off in front of my brownstone in Brooklyn, a financial relic of my past ambition. The 3-story house was too large for one person, a monument to the salary I just lost. The key in the lock felt heavy, cold, a sudden, tangible weight of a mortgage payment that now loomed not as an inconvenience, but as an immediate threat. I bypassed the ornate living room, the pristine kitchen, and went straight to my home office. It wasn't a place for quiet reflection. It was a fortress of solitude where I often escaped the demanding nature of Phoenix Financial even after hours. Tonight, it would become the war room. I put the pathetic cardboard box, still clutched in my hands, down gently by the waste bin. The sight of the sad, wilting succulent I called Market Maker was a jarring reminder of my old life. Obsolete. The word still stung, but the burning rage of the afternoon had begun to cool, solidifying into a sharp, crystalline focus. First things first, Clara and Mom. I needed to stabilize the foundation before I could launch the attack. I called my bank, arranging the wire transfer for Clara's apartment deposit. It wiped out a significant chunk of my ready cash, but it was essential. Clara had secured a small gallery space in Chelsea that required a hefty deposit, and the first 6 months ran up front. She was on the precipice of her dream, and I wouldn't let my downfall sabotage her ascent. Elara, you sound off, Clara said, her voice a mix of concern and the low, vibrant energy that always characterized her. Just a long day, sweetie, I lied, leaning back in my leather chair, the leather cool against my neck. The Kessler deal closed, and you know how messy the aftermath is. I sent the transfer. It should be there in the morning. Oh, Elara, you're a lifesaver. I swear, I'll sell enough sculptures this year to buy you that ridiculous yacht you always joke about. I allowed myself a small, genuine smile. Just a small oil painting will do, sis. Look, I'm exhausted. Gotta run some numbers for tomorrow. Tell Mom I love her, and yes, I'll call her this weekend. I ended the call quickly, before the tremor in my voice could give me away. I sat there in the dark office, watching the city lights flicker outside, and did what I do best, analyze the problem. The situation, fired. Severance package pending but likely tied up in red tape. Mortgage, $7,000 month. Mother's care, $3,000 month. My current savings could sustain us for perhaps 8 months max. The goal, build a new, sustainable financial structure that provides for my family and simultaneously allows me to exact professional revenge on Phoenix Financial, specifically Marcus Sterling. The plan, phase I, the seed, leverage my professional network and specialized knowledge to secure initial capital and a base of operations. I turned on my dual monitors. The first thing I did was review the email I'd sent to Victor, the vulture, Crawl, the venture capitalist. Victor had made his fortune on 2 things, exploiting corporate weakness and betting big on radical ideas. He was a ruthless operator, But he was also a man who appreciated value, and he nursed a decade-long grudge against Phoenix Financial for stiffing him on a hostile takeover bid. Within minutes, my phone rang. The screen displayed an unrecognizable number, but I knew it was him. Ilara Vance. That was quite the cryptic email. Victor's voice crackled, a low, rasping sound like dry leaves. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. Victor, Phoenix Financial decided I was a liability rather than an asset. They showed me the door, I stated, my voice flat, professional. A loss for them, I imagine. A gain for whomever scoops up their discarded talent. What's the proposition? I don't deal in small stakes, Ilara. I'm not interested in being scooped up, Victor. I'm interested in starting my own fund, a boutique advisory specializing in distress acquisition and activist investing. You know my track record. I brought in billions for Phoenix. Now I can do it for myself. A fund, with what capital, with what infrastructure? He scoffed, the sound grating. I have the most valuable commodity Phoenix Financial just threw away. Insider knowledge, I countered, leaning closer to the microphone, injecting confidence into every syllable. I know precisely which of their current high-profile assets are underperforming due to poor management. I know where their clients are vulnerable and who is looking to jump ship. More importantly, I know Marcus Sterling's expansion plan. He's over-leveraging on 2 risky tech acquisitions right now. Give me a seed investment of $5 million, a shared office space, and a handshake agreement for 10% equity in my first 3 successful deals. In return, I guarantee your $5 million is secured against 2 specific, low-risk, high-return private equity targets I prepared for Phoenix, but which Marcus deemed too old school and shelved. The silence stretched, thick and heavy. I held my breath. $5 million was a huge ask, but it was the number necessary to command respect, hire a basic team, and critically start trading immediately. You know the bodies are buried, eh? Victor finally mused, the amusement returning to his voice. You truly believe you can compete with the behemoth you just left? I don't just believe it, Victor. I know it. I was in the engine room for 12 years. I built the machine. I know exactly how to exploit its weak points. And unlike Phoenix, I won't be beholden to a complacent board or a slick, overconfident COO like Marcus Sterling. My only loyalty is to profit, and right now, the greatest profit lies in making Phoenix bleed. Victor Krall was not a man of sentiment, but he understood the cold equation of professional hatred. $5 million. We draw up the papers tomorrow. You get the money in 3 days. I want a weekly meeting and full transparency. No games, Ilara. I'm giving you a rope. Don't hang yourself. Understood, Victor. I look forward to working with you. I hung up, my hand shaking slightly. I had secured the capital. The seed had been planted. Now I needed to germinate it. I spent the next 48 hours in a blur of caffeine and focused intensity. I hired a small legal team on a retainer and rented a tiny, unassuming office space 3 subway stops away from Phoenix Financial. I avoided the glamorous downtown core. I needed anonymity and low overhead. I registered the company, Vance Capital Management. The name was plain, direct, and unpretentious. My first and most critical hire was an old acquaintance, Ben Carter. Ben was a quantitative analyst, a math genius who possessed an almost supernatural ability to spot patterns in market data. He'd been marginalized at Phoenix for his introverted nature and his refusal to play office politics. He was precisely the kind of overlooked talent I needed. I found him at his usual spot, a dive bar near the university where he sometimes lectured. He was nursing a beer, surrounded by stacks of theoretical finance journals. Ilara, what are you doing here? Did the market crash? Ben asked, adjusting his thick-rimmed glasses, a look of genuine surprise on his face. I slid into the booth opposite him. The market is fine, Ben. Phoenix Financial, however, is not. They fired me. And I'm starting a fund. I need a partner, not an employee. I need your brain, Ben. I need the guy who showed me how the algorithms were manipulating the municipal bond market in 17. I'll give you a starting salary double what Phoenix paid you, full health benefits, and 15% of the fund's profits after Victor's cut. No corporate BS, no mandatory golf outings, just pure analysis. You in. Ben took a long sip of his beer, his eyes narrowed in calculation. No golf, and I get to tell people to their faces when their models are trash. No golf, and unfiltered, ruthless mathematical truth, I confirmed, a fierce glint in my eye. A slow, delighted smile spread across Ben's face. You were the only one at Phoenix who ever saw my value, Elara. You've got yourself a quant. When do we start dismantling the competition? We start tomorrow, Ben. Our first target is Ethos Tech. You know their IPO. Marcus Sterling pushed it through, against my recommendation. I warned them the valuation was soft. I want you to run an exhaustive model on their Q3 financials. I smell a shorting opportunity. With Ben on board and the capital secured, phase I was complete. Vance Capital Management was a ghost ship of two people operating out of a tiny office. But we had the intellect, the capital, and the blueprint for Phoenix's doom. As I took the subway home that night, the weight on my shoulders had shifted. It was no longer the oppressive burden of fear, but the exhilarating gravity of a calculated risk. I pulled up the latest Phoenix Financial Annual Report on my phone. The smiling, confident face of Marcus Sterling stared back at me from the COO's message. He looked triumphant, untouchable. I remembered the laughter. Trevor, Jenna, the whole chorus of indifference and cruelty. They thought I was out. They thought the old guard was done. I closed the report. I felt a surge of cold power. They didn't know it, but they had just given me a 12-year head start on revenge. I didn't need Phoenix's prestige. I didn't need their corner offices. I had something far more valuable, zero constraints. They were tied up in compliance, red tape, and internal politics. I was a missile, locked and loaded. I would move faster, take bigger risks, and exploit every weakness I had once been obligated to protect. I got off the subway, walked the few blocks to my dark, silent house, and went straight to the refrigerator. I pulled out a bottle of cheap sparkling cider, a non-alcoholic tradition I kept for small victories. I raised the glass to the empty room. To obsolescence, I whispered, the word now tasting like sweet victory, and to the fire that always follows the ice. The next 6 months were a relentless, consuming blur. Vance Capital Management, VCM, operating out of a cramped office suite that smelled perpetually of old pizza and Ben's overheating server, was the complete antithesis of Phoenix Financial's gleaming, overmanned corporate fortress. We didn't have a floor of junior analysts, nor a dedicated team for investor relations. We had me, Ben, and a single, overworked administrative assistant I'd hired part-time, Maria, who was quickly becoming proficient in both SEC filings and emergency caffeine runs. My world was now defined by 3 screens, one for market surveillance, one for Ben's dizzying array of proprietary models, and one for the intricate, often convoluted internal documents I had managed to retain and implicitly understood from my time at Phoenix. Our first big move, the one I had secured Victor Kral's seed money with, was executed with cold precision. Ethos Tech, the acquisition Marcus Sterling had championed and I had warned against, was the perfect shorting target. The Q3 reports are pure theater, Elara, Ben declared one late night, his face illuminated by the green glow of his monitor. Their reported user growth is manufactured by bundling services to defunct subsidiaries. When you strip away the creative accounting, their primary revenue stream has shrunk by 18% year-over-year. Marcus focused on the narrative. He ignored the math. Their valuation is a house of cards. Exactly, I said, running a hand through my hair. And Marcus is about to dump a fresh tranche of Phoenix client money into Ethelred's secondary, offering next week to artificially stabilize the stock ahead of the Q4 review. He's overcommitted and desperate. Ben's model suggested an 80% probability of a significant drop. We moved. Through Victor Kral's established, opaque network of high-frequency trading platforms, VCM took a massive, leveraged short position against Ethelred. It was an aggressive, high-risk maneuver, but I had the insider's conviction. The day the secondary offering launched, it was chaos. Marcus's injection of Phoenix capital stabilized the price for exactly 4 hours, giving him a fleeting moment of triumphant smugness. Then, Ben's analysis, combined with a perfectly timed, anonymous regulatory leak we had subtly orchestrated concerning Ethelred's questionable bundling practices, hit the wires. The stock plunged. Not a gentle correction, but a dizzying, catastrophic drop. The profits were immediate and staggering. In 48 hours, VCM netted $14 million on the short sale. After settling Victor's capital and paying him his 10% cut, we had effectively secured a significant, independent capital base. VCM was no longer a startup. It was a proven entity. I didn't celebrate. I simply looked at Ben, a profound sense of vindication settling over me. That, Ben, is the sound of Marcus Sterling's expansion plans hitting a wall. The ripple effects were delicious. Ethelred's crash was attributed to unforeseen market dynamics and a sudden investor panic, but within the financial community, the whispers started. Someone, a small, aggressive player, had seen the weakness Phoenix had ignored, or worse, tried to hide. The success of the Ethelred short brought me back into the orbit of my old colleagues, but on my terms. Phone calls started pouring in not from Phoenix, but from panicked, wealthy clients I used to manage. They smelled blood and saw an opportunity. They didn't care about my firing. They only cared about the fact that I had made money when everyone else was scrambling. Alara, what the hell is VCM? And how did you know Ethelred was going to crater? Boomed the voice of Mr. Donovan, a high-net-worth individual whose portfolio I had managed for 10 years at Phoenix. Mr. Donovan, I replied calmly, leaning back, the cheap office chair squeaking slightly. Vance Capital Management specializes in identifying underpriced risk and overvalued vanity projects. My analysis of Ethelred's fundamentals was independent and accurate, something that, apparently, Phoenix Financial is no longer prioritizing. He paused. I want to move my portfolio. Now, I hear your fees are outrageous. They are, I confirmed. I charge a high premium for competence, Mr. Donovan, but unlike Phoenix, my focus is singular, your returns. I don't have board meetings or internal politics distracting me. I am your sole, devoted fiduciary. Over the next few months, I systematically poached 3 of my most lucrative, long-standing clients from Phoenix. They didn't leave because they hated Marcus, but because they understood a simple truth. Loyalty in finance follows the money. When Marcus Sterling tried to retain them, he was too busy defending Ethelred's fallout to pay them proper attention. He was stretched thin, reacting to a crisis I had manufactured, and he never once suspected I was the one pulling the strings. As VCM grew, I meticulously kept my family life separate. Clara's gallery, Vance Visions, was flourishing. She called me, ecstatic about selling her first major piece. I used the deposit money, Alara, and now I'm making it back. I'm finally standing on my own 2 feet. It's thanks to you, she said, her voice brimming with happy tears. This was the other side of my ambition, the silent, profound reason for the war I was waging. I was ensuring Clara's independence. I was building a shield of wealth that would protect her and Mom from any future corporate whims or market volatility. You earned it, Clara. Your talent earned it, I insisted, always deflecting the praise. I never told her about VCM or the scale of the risk I was taking. To them, I was consulting. The pressure of leading a double life began to wear on me. I was the ruthless, calculating CEO by day and the supportive, calm big sister by night. Sleep was a luxury I rarely afforded myself. I lived on the edge of a blade, acutely aware that one wrong move, one bad deal, and the entire structure would collapse, taking my family's security with it. The 6-month mark brought me to my next, more personal target, Trevor. The arrogant, laughing junior associate from my firing day was exactly the kind of overconfident young talent Marcus Sterling was promoting. Trevor had been promoted to my old senior VP position, a move that was less about merit and more about Marcus's need to install a loyal, pliable puppet. I was ready to make my move. The new target was Concordia Pharma, a mid-sized pharmaceutical company Phoenix Financial was handling the M&A advisory for. Trevor was the VP in charge of the due diligence. I had access to the initial due diligence documents from my time at Phoenix. I knew, crucially, about a small, easily overlooked caveat in Concordia's primary drug patent, a flaw that made the patent highly vulnerable to a specific type of legal challenge. Marcus had knowingly buried this risk. Desperate to close the high-profile deal, he had tasked Treva with the surface-level checks, trusting his inexperience. I instructed Ben, "I want a shell company set up, nothing traceable back to VCM. I want us to acquire a small, legitimate but struggling competitor to Concordia. Call it Argus Therapeutics." "Argus, why a competitor?" Ben asked. "Because, Ben, we're not going to short the deal. We're going to kill it. We will acquire Argus, and then Argus, using the patent vulnerability I've identified, is going to launch a massive, highly specific legal challenge against Concordia's core product. It will paralyze the acquisition, reveal Phoenix's negligent due diligence, and leave Mucka's holding a worthless, legally encumbered asset." This was more than a financial attack. It was a surgical strike designed to expose the incompetence of Mucka's, and by extension, Treva. The attack hit Phoenix with the force of a wrecking ball. Argus Therapeutics, a company no one had ever heard of, filed a landmark lawsuit against Concordia just 48 hours before the merger was set to close. The legal challenge wasn't frivolous. It was mathematically and legally airtight, directly targeting the weakness Mucka's and Treva had ignored. The merger collapsed, instantly, publicly, and spectacularly. The loss for Phoenix Financial was in the hundreds of millions, damaging their reputation as competent M&A advisors. The news broke while I was in the office, sipping a cooling cup of tea. Ben looked at me, a mixture of awe and fear in his eyes. "You didn't just win, Alara," he murmured. "You cornered them. The SEC is going to be breathing down their necks for negligent due diligence. Treva is going to take the fall for this, isn't he?" I looked at the news headline, the words, "Phoenix Financial M&A Collapse," due diligence questioned, burning on the screen. I finally allowed myself a fleeting, dark moment of satisfaction. "Treva laughed the loudest, Ben. He thought my failure was his opportunity," I said, my voice low and devoid of emotion. "Marcus will sacrifice him to protect himself, because that is what Marcus Sterling does. Trevor will be looking for a new job by the end of the week, and I will ensure he doesn't find one in finance for a very long time." I didn't just want to be rich. I wanted the men who had mocked my professional demise to feel the absolute, agonizing helplessness I had felt that day I walked out of Phoenix. I wanted the laughter to turn into a shuddering silence. With 2 major, high-profile successes and a rapidly growing fund, Victor Krall stopped asking for weekly reports and started proposing partnerships. My old clients were transferring more money than ever. VCM was flying. The seed money was now an empire in miniature. I looked out the small, dusty window of the VCM office suite. The laughter had been silenced by the clink of millions. 12 years ago, I was climbing their corporate ladder. Today, I was using the wreckage of that ladder as the foundation for my own, far higher structure. But the war wasn't over. Marcus Sterling was still sitting in my old corner of the building, still wielding the power I had once helped him earn. He was my final, ultimate target. And for Marcus, I needed a play so audacious, so public, it would not just destroy his career, but redefine the entire legacy of Phoenix Financial. I pulled out a file from my secure safe, a digital archive of everything I knew about Phoenix's internal structure. I circled one name, one specific, vulnerable asset, a piece of proprietary technology that Marcus had been tasked with protecting, and which I knew was the linchpin of their entire future growth. The time for small skirmishes was over. It was time for the final, hostile move. My focus narrowed to a single point, Project Nightingale. Nightingale wasn't just an asset, it was the crown jewel of Phoenix Financial's future. It was a proprietary, AI-driven trading platform designed by a team of ex-MIT physicists and funded entirely by the firm's black box innovation budget. The platform promised to predict market anomalies with terrifying accuracy, granting Phoenix a critical, permanent edge over competitors. Marcus Sterling had staked his entire reputation on bringing Nightingale to full deployment by the end of the fiscal year. If he succeeded, he would be untouchable. If he failed, the firm's massive investment in the project would be exposed as a catastrophic loss, and his career would be over. I knew about Nightingale because, 2 years prior, I had been the internal sponsor who signed off on its initial funding. I had seen the early models, understood the core logic, and crucially, I knew the fatal flaw in its security architecture. The head of the Nightingale team, a brilliant but deeply paranoid coder named Dr. Julian Hayes, had insisted on a unique, centralized security key, a single, physical encrypted drive stored not in the highly secure server farm, but in a small, out-of-the-way analog safe in his personal, unmonitored home office. He did this out of distrust for the firm's internal IT department, believing the human element was the weakest link. I knew this because, during a particularly fraught review meeting, Julian, high on espresso and stress, had described his fail-safe in vivid, almost obsessive detail. "Ilera," I told Ben, pulling up the old funding documents, "we are going to launch a hostile, high-visibility attack against Phoenix Financial. Not by trading, but by cutting off their life support." Ben, who had grown visibly more confident with each VCM success, pushed his glasses up his nose. "A hostile takeover? VCM is still too small for that, even with Victor's backing. The regulatory hurdles alone." "No, we're not taking over the firm, Ben. We're taking over their future. We're going to acquire Project Nightingale." Ben's jaw dropped. "That's industrial espionage, Ilera. That's prison time." "It's hostile acquisition through unconventional means, Ben. The platform itself is tied up in complex intellectual property contracts, but its operation depends entirely on that single key. Julian Hayes is the weak point. He's overworked, underappreciated, and due for his annual performance review, which, knowing Marcus, is going to be brutal." I initiated Phase Alpha, the seduction. I tracked Julian down to a tiny, obscure lab in Greenwich Village, where he spent his weekends working on personal projects. I arranged a casual, carefully non-corporate meeting. I didn't arrive as Ilera Vance, the former senior VP. I arrived as a sympathetic, independent consultant. "Julian," I greeted him, shaking his hand, nodding the deep circles under his eyes and the defeated slump of his shoulders. "It's been a while. I see Phoenix is running you ragged, as usual." He sighed, running a hand through his perpetually messy hair. "They think code is magic, Ilera. Marcus keeps asking when Nightingale will predict the damn future. They don't understand the necessary time for optimization. They just want the returns." "I understand, Julian," I said, leaning in conspiratorially. "I truly do. I was there when the funding was approved. I remember your vision. And I remember the lack of respect the firm showed for your incredible caution. That single-point security system, for instance. Brilliant." My acknowledgement of his paranoia was the key. He immediately relaxed, feeling seen and validated. Over the next few weeks, I became his confidant. I talked about Marcus Sterling's incompetence, his obsession with quick wins, and his profound lack of technical understanding. I didn't lie. I simply highlighted every truth Julian already felt. I presented VCM not as a rival, but as a potential sanctuary for his genius. "Julian," I finally proposed one cold evening, "what if you didn't have to deliver Nightingale to Marcus? What if you had an environment where your work was truly respected and shielded from corporate pressure? An environment where you own the IP?" I offered him a position as the Chief Technology Officer of a new VCM subsidiary, a position with full creative autonomy, an 8-figure salary, and a 25% equity stake in the profits generated by the technology. The offer was so far beyond anything Phoenix would ever give him, it was practically irresistible. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place during Julian's catastrophic performance review. Marcus Sterling, true to form, eviscerated him for delays and cost overruns, threatening to install an outside project manager. The next day, Julian walked into VCM's office with the small, nondescript analog safe in tow. He had quit Phoenix with a calculated letter of resignation that cited intolerable professional disrespect and a lack of creative freedom. "They thought they owned the platform, Ilera," Julian said, his eyes glowing with fierce defiance. They own the paper, but I own the logic. Without the key, Nightingale is just a collection of expensive servers. Now, we own the key. Within 24 hours, VCM had Project Nightingale, rebranded under a new, even more secretive entity. Ben was already integrating the code, verifying its terrifying potential. The success of this coup was beyond financial. It was a fundamental shift in the power dynamic. But I knew this wouldn't be enough for Muckas. He would assume Julian had simply taken the files. He wouldn't immediately realize the severity of losing the core IP. I needed to deliver the final blow, a public, humiliating display that would shatter his professional credibility and bring Phoenix Financial to its knees. The opportunity arose with Phoenix's annual client summit. This was Mucka's coming-out party, his chance to present his vision for the future. He was planning a lavish presentation, culminating in a live demonstration of Nightingale's purported capabilities, a spectacle of arrogance designed to reassure the firm's most powerful clients. "We strike at the summit, Ben," I declared. "We don't need to be there. We need our actions to be felt. Julian, I need you to do two things. First, verify Nightingale's current trading parameters. What specific high-stakes trades is Mucka's planning for the live demo? Second, I need you to build a counter-algorithm, a simple, elegant code that will exploit the single known flaw in the current version of Nightingale. We need to turn their greatest weapon against them." The plan was audacious, bordering on insane. VCM would use the new, superior, and fully controlled Nightingale to sabotage Phoenix's own demonstration in real time, in front of their most important clients and the entire financial media. The day of the summit arrived. I sat in my small VCM office, watching the live stream of the event on one monitor while Ben and Julian huddled over the trading console on the other. Mucka's Sterling stood on the stage, impeccable in a custom suit, his slick charm turned up to maximum wattage. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mucka's announced to the packed hall, "I give you the future of finance, Project Nightingale. Watch as our AI predicts and executes a trade that will capture a minimum 15% return in the next 5 minutes, leveraging an arbitrage opportunity no human could possibly perceive." He gave the command. The projected screen behind him showed the trade launching, a massive, leveraged buy of a complex derivative based on a mid-cap energy stock, a bold, confident move designed to impress. Ben looked at me, his eyes blazing with a mixture of fear and excitement. "Now, Alara, the counter code is loaded. It's a precision strike. It won't crash their system, but it will zero out the returns on this specific trade and trigger a cascade effect based on the loophole Julian designed." I nodded, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Execute." On the live feed, the trade started moving in the projected direction. Up, up, up. Mucka's smiled, a triumphant, self-congratulatory look plastered on his face. Then the numbers on the screen stalled. The stock price, which had been climbing, suddenly flatlined. Then it began a slow, inexplicable, but relentless descent. Mucka's smile wavered. He glanced nervously off stage. "A momentary market correction," he stammered, his voice losing its smooth cadence. "Nightingale is adjusting." But Nightingale wasn't adjusting. The counter-algorithm had done its work. The trade, instead of generating a 15% gain, plunged into a 20% loss in under 2 minutes. The reaction in the ballroom was immediate and audible. Gasps, the murmur of nervous conversation. The catastrophic loss played out on a massive screen in front of the world's financial elite. Mucka's Sterling's face went from pale to a mottled crimson. The entire, carefully orchestrated spectacle had imploded. I leaned back in my chair, the tension draining out of me in a rush. I hadn't needed to laugh at him. I had delivered a wound so public, so precise, it was worse than any firing. It was professional annihilation. The next day, the headlines screamed the story. "Phoenix Financial AI debacle, strategic failure or deep flaw." The questions weren't about the market. They were about Mucka's Sterling's judgment and the viability of his core strategy. The fallout was swift. The board, humiliated and terrified of the potential liability, forced Mucka's to resign, citing irreconcilable differences in strategic vision. Treva, already on thin ice from the Concordia disaster, was unceremoniously escorted out by security. The laughter had become a long, cold silence. VCM, meanwhile, was hailed as a rising star, a boutique fund that managed to thrive while the giants stumbled. Victor Krull was ecstatic. My professional revenge was complete. I had not only regained my footing, but I had fundamentally altered the landscape of the firm that had discarded me. But the most important victory was yet to come. With the immense, legitimate wealth I had built, I was able to secure my family's future in ways I had only dreamed of. My mother was moved to the best private care facility. Clara's gallery, Vance Visions, was expanded into a major studio space, entirely owned and debt-free. I looked at my phone. A message from Clara. "Allura, I have huge news." I said yes. "Can you believe it?" he proposed. "I need you to be my maid of honor, of course, but I had an even crazier idea." I smiled, a genuine, profound smile that reached my eyes. The ice was finally, truly melted. I had fought the war for this, for the pure, unadulterated joy in my sister's voice. I was ready for the next, most personal chapter. The scent of gardenias always took me back to Bethany, Mr. Thunna's fearful secretary, but the aroma now filling my sun-drenched Brooklyn kitchen was swata, more natural, Clara's favorite diffuser oil. The financial war was over, but the life war, the one fought for happiness and presence, was just beginning. Clara burst through the door, a flurry of vibrant scarves and ecstatic energy. Her fiancé, Uthan, a quiet, bearded architect whose calm grounded her effervescence, trailed behind, smiling indulgently. "Allura, did you get my text? I can't believe it. We're doing it." Clara twirled, nearly knocking over a vase of hydrangeas. "I got it," I said, leaning against the marble counter, a warmth blooming in my chest that no successful trade had ever generated. "Congratulations, you too. Uthan, welcome to the family. And yes, I'll be your maid of honor. I've already cleared my calendar, which these days is surprisingly easy." I had done more than clear my calendar. With VCM running on autopilot, Ben and Julian handling the day-to-day operations, and Victor Krull now a major, hands-off partner, I had stepped back. I kept the title of CEO, but my focus had shifted from aggressive acquisition to strategic oversight. I had made enough money, more than enough, and the true victory was claiming my time back. Clara stopped twirling and grabbed my hands. Her expression, usually bright, became serious, her eyes holding a familiar mixture of determination and vulnerability. "Maid of honor is the minimum, Allura. We had a huge, insane, wonderful idea," she began, the words tumbling out. "You know how Mom's health is, and how much this wedding means to her. We want a big wedding, a beautiful ceremony, but we need it to be absolutely perfect, completely stress-free, and most of all soon. And with everything you've done for us, for me. Allura, Ethan and I want you to walk me down the aisle." The air left my lungs in a silent gasp. "Clara, that's your father." "Our father hasn't been in our lives for 20 years, Allura," she interrupted gently, her grip tightening. "And honestly, the thought of Mom struggling to walk that distance, it's too much. The traditional thing doesn't matter. You've been the one. You were the one who worked 3 jobs to put me through art school. You were the one who bought Mom that apartment and made sure her nurses are the best. You've been my shield, my constant, my everything. When I walk down that aisle, I want the person who has supported me, protected me, and raised me to be the one giving me away." She finished, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Ethan nodded, his hand resting reassuringly on her shoulder. The moment was a profound, quiet recognition of the role I had played. The Ice Queen of Phoenix Financial, the one they laughed at, was now being asked to take the place of the patriarch, acknowledged as the true foundation of her family. "I would be honored, Clara," I finally managed, my voice thick with emotion. "It would be my greatest honor." The planning began immediately, and it consumed me in a way corporate finance never had. My old life had been about calculated risks and measurable returns. This new life was about emotional investment and unpredictable joy. The wedding was set for 6 months later, giving me ample time to execute the perfect plan. I didn't just walk Clara down the aisle. I became the chief wedding strategist. My organizational skills, honed over a decade of closing billion-dollar deals, were now deployed for linens, catering, and venue contracts. No detail was too small, no budget line item left unoptimized. I secured a stunning venue on the coast of Maine, a grand, historic estate with cliffs overlooking the Atlantic. It was remote, private, and breathtakingly expensive. The cost was negligible to me now, but the peace and natural beauty were priceless, especially for my mother. Speaking of Mom, she was delighted by the news and the role I was taking. She was frail, but her mind was sharp. "You've always been the strong one, Alara, the quiet warrior," she told me one afternoon over video chat, a soft smile gracing her lips. "I'm so proud of the woman you've become, not the one who had the big office, but the one who cares for her sister." This was the validation I truly craved. Not the billions in VCM's portfolio, but the respect of the two women I had fought so hard to protect. Amidst the planning, there were small, unavoidable reminders of the past. A few weeks before the wedding, I received an anonymous email, likely from a former HR contact I still paid on the side, with the subject line, "Update on the Agile Ones." I opened it, curious. It was a summary of the professional fates of the people who had laughed that day. Marcus Sterling. After the Nightingale disaster, he was blacklisted. He briefly attempted a small hedge fund, but without the Phoenix name and the stigma of the failure, he folded within a year. He was now selling high-end insurance, the humiliation clearly visible in the terse summary. Trevor, fired after the Concordia collapse and unable to secure a position in major finance, he was working as a mid-level manager at a regional credit union. His meteoric rise had been reversed. Jenna, she managed to survive the purge but was permanently sidelined. She was now in a non-client-facing compliance role, a bureaucratic dead end that was the corporate equivalent of professional purgatory. I read the document twice. The feeling wasn't triumph, but a settled sense of justice. Their laughter had been based on the faulty premise that they were climbing, and I was falling. They thought the traditional rules of the corporate game protected them. I had simply played a better, fiercer game. I deleted the email. It no longer mattered. My current life was infinitely more vibrant than their continued misery. The final weeks before the wedding were a beautiful chaos. Clara and I went to the final dress fitting. She spun in the gown, a cascade of ivory silk looking radiant. "It's perfect, Alara," she whispered, looking at her reflection. "But more than the dress, I can't wait for that walk, for that moment with you." "Me too, kiddo, me too," I replied, a lump forming in my throat. The night before the wedding, I sat alone in my room at the Maine estate, listening to the roar of the ocean. The room smelled of salt and pine. I pulled out my laptop, not to look at stock charts, but to reread the dedication in that worn copy of The Intelligent Investor I had carried out in the box. "To Alara, the one who always finishes what she starts. Love, Mom and Clara." I had started a life for them, built it, defended it, and now I was ready to walk my greatest victory, my sister, into her new future. The woman who had been fired and laughed at 12 years ago was now standing on the precipice of a different kind of success, one measured not in quarterly returns, but in love, security, and familial honor. My alarm was set for dawn. I needed to be the first one up, not for the market open, but to oversee the placement of the aisle runner. My last official duty as the chief wedding strategist, before taking my place as the family's greatest honor guard. The morning air of coastal Maine was cool and clean, carrying the salty tang of the Atlantic. The sun, a perfect disk of gold, was just cresting the horizon, painting the sky in colors Clara always tried and failed to capture on canvas. I was up before anyone, moving through the grand estate with the quiet efficiency of a CEO executing a pre-market trade. I checked the floral arrangements, confirmed the placement of the chairs on the lawn overlooking the cliffs, and personally secured the elegant, lace-edged aisle runner. Every detail was flawless. I found Clara in the bridal suite, a luminous room already filled with the excited chatter of bridesmaids and the professional calm of hair and makeup artists. She wore a simple silk robe, her face scrubbed clean, her excitement palpable. When she saw me, her anxiety melted away. Alara, she whispered, pulling me into a fierce, scented hug. You're already dressed. You look incredible. I wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, a deliberate choice. It was a subtle nod to my professional armor, now repurposed for the ultimate domestic triumph. You're the one who needs to look incredible, kiddo. And you will, I said, holding her at arm's length. The weather is perfect, the flowers are fresh, and Ethan is downstairs packing like a terrified shareholder. Everything is exactly as it should be. We spent the next few hours in the intimate, slow-motion ritual of dressing. As I helped Clara secure the final tiny buttons on her gown, the weight of the moment settled over me. This dress, this entire exquisite day, was a culmination, not just of her love story, but of my own struggle. Every late night at Phoenix, every deal closed, every ruthless move I made at VCM had ultimately bought her this peace, this security, this perfection. The financial battlefield had been traded for this sacred ground. Just 30 minutes before the ceremony, I went to check on our mother. She was resting comfortably in a small, sunny parlor, attended by her favorite nurse. She was dressed in a soft blue dress, her face alight with an exhausted but profound happiness. "My beautiful girls," she said, her voice frail but clear, reaching for my hand. "I'm so glad you're doing this, Alara. This is the greatest investment you've ever made." "I agree, Mom," I said, squeezing her hand. I helped the nurse adjust her shawl, ensuring she was comfortable and had a perfect view of the ceremony space through the arched window. She didn't need to walk the distance, she just needed to witness the joy. The time arrived. The music started, a string quartet playing a piece Clara had composed. The wedding party began their slow procession down the manicured lawn toward the cliff edge where Ethan waited, his back to the churning ocean. Then it was our turn. I took my place beside Clara. She looped her arm through mine, her grip surprisingly strong. Her hand, encased in a delicate white glove, rested firmly on my gray wool sleeve. I felt the slight tremor of her excitement run through my arm. "Ready, big sister," she whispered, her eyes shining like wet amber. "Always," I affirmed, my voice steady. We started the walk. The pace was deliberate, measured, a slow, purposeful march to a new beginning. I didn't look at the crowd. I focused only on the path ahead and the small, perfect profile of my sister beside me. The sun was high now, casting a golden light that seemed to halo Clara's veil. Every step was a silent affirmation of my journey. The footsteps I heard 12 years ago, the panicked, hurried steps of a woman carrying a box of discarded possessions, chased by the sound of corporate laughter, were now replaced by this slow, powerful stride. They laughed when I was fired. I remembered Trevor's sneer, Jenna's condescending giggle. They laughed because they thought I was finished. They thought the humiliation would break me. But the only thing I broke was the glass ceiling they stood under. I used their laughter as fuel, their arrogance as leverage, and their fear as capital. I had not just survived. I had created a legacy of security and independence for the two most important people in my life. We reached the end of the aisle. Ethan turned, his face breaking into a radiant, sincere smile when he saw Clara. He was everything she deserved. I didn't give her away like a possession. Instead, I paused, looking from Clara to Ethan, a protective yet proud sense of completeness settling over me. I gave them both a nod, a silent contract of trust and support. I gently unhooked Clara's arm from mine and placed her hand securely in Ethan's. This was the moment of transfer, not of ownership, but of shared guardianship. Ethan looked at me, a profound gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you, Alara." I simply squeezed his hand once, then moved to take my place in the front row, directly beside my beaming mother. As I settled into my seat, the officiant began to speak. I looked out at the ocean, then back at my sister, radiant and safe, standing on the edge of her future. The laughter from 12 years ago was utterly, completely silent now. It had been drowned out by the roar of the ocean and the sweet, triumphant music of a wedding day. I was the one who walked my sister down the aisle. I was the one who paid for the wedding. I was the one who rebuilt the family's foundation. And in that moment, I realized that my revenge wasn't the collapse of Phoenix Financial or the downfall of Marcus Sterling. My greatest triumph was this simple, unassailable fact. I had turned my biggest failure into their greatest loss, and my family's greatest gain. I smiled, a full, unburdened smile. The Ice Queen was finally, unequivocally happy.